Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. So this video is going to be part 3 of what if I made the new warriors. So the third character on this list is B negative, which according to the Marvel article introducing the characters, here's what it says. A teen living vampire exposed to Michael Morbius' blood as a child in a rogue but life saving medical procedure. He still ages like a regular kid, but has all the abilities of Morbius. He's also obsessed with all the music and attitude of a classic long past decades like the 90s and the 2000s. The world is a vampire, and so am I. B negative is the goth kid. When he was a baby, he got a rogue life-saving blood transfusion, we assume, from Michael Morbius. And now he has a very similar look and very similar vampire powers, shares Kibblesmith. B negative ages like a regular person, or does he? And he definitely drinks blood, or does he? But designer artist Luciano Vecchio took brilliant inspiration from the 90s Spider-Man cartoon and gave B negative the leech suckers that the animated version of Morbius had on his palms. Okay, so my version naturally of B negative is going to be very different. So what I thought of, especially when I looked at this design, I said, this is not goth. This is nowhere near goth. This is closer to punk with a vampire twist. So what I've done is that I've reimagined the character as basically a British teen punk rocker. So he still has the love of classic music, right? But it's mainly of like British punk bands, like the Sex Pistols and bands of that nature. So the first place I started with the change was actually in the name. While I'm keeping B negative, right? Because again, the blood type and the pun on having a bad attitude, and punks, especially back in the 70s and 80s, were all about wearing their bad attitudes on their sleeves, and they didn't give a damn about who they offended. But I wanted the B to be something more than just, a blood type or what's the word I'm looking for? Or a reference, or rather a play on words. So I thought, okay, B, English punk rocker. Okay, well, there's a lot of Williams in English history, right? And Billies. There's Billy Kane, there's Billy Idol, there's William Shakespeare, there's Prince William, there's William the Conqueror. So I decided that his real name, right? Because unlike Marvel, I've actually been giving these characters actual names, right? Trailblazer, I named her Bianca Owens. Screen time, I named him Ichiro Inoue. So, being that this young man is English, I decided, okay, how about his real name? And I've been through a few different things, but I settled on William Richards. William Richards. William for all the Billies in English history, and Richards for King Richard the Lionhearted. Again, you're gonna see England as a theme here with this character. So I figured that, and okay, the common nickname for William is Bill or Billy, B negative. So that's kind of how it all sort of works back together to his actual name. So that's what I decided to name him. So this is my version of B negative, right? So his real name is William, also known as Billy Richards. It's also a nice callback, although I didn't intend it. I just realized now with the Smashing Pumpkins reference, Billy Corgan, though that was not my intention. But you can see how it sort of touches upon various things. So here is my version of B negative, Billy Richards. So first, the look. The look, like I've said in the other video I did about the new Warriors, I actually really like. The only thing I would do is that I would remove the strap, the belt on his upper leg, and straighten out the belt on his waist because I think visually, especially given that for his appearance he still is only a teenage boy. I, as a grown woman, do not want to have my eye directed toward a teenager's groin. So I would just remove the strap on the leg, straighten out the belt, and that's pretty much it. Maybe make the belt a little bit bigger and more prominent so it pops out a little bit more. But that's about it. Otherwise, everything else I would keep. I really like my favorite part is the winged bat jacket. It has like that like fencer style leather jacket that I've always been a fan of, and then the pink bat wings under it. So I like it. As a design, it was the only one that I thought was actually interesting and creative and would definitely stand out. So the only thing I would fix is the belt and the strap on the leg. That's it. Everything else is fine in my opinion. Excuse me. So the body. So the body I actually think is okay. The only difference is that I would just make him a little taller and I would give him a lanky but muscular physique, sort of like Alucard here from the Castlevania anime, or Alexander the Great in this image from Reign the Conqueror. But obviously, Billy Boy here is wearing a lot more clothes. So there's that. Right, so not much I would change in the visual design department, just mainly small things. So the style, right? So he's gonna be wearing, his sort of standard vampire rocker boy design, and he actually is in a punk rock band. I just want to point that out. He actually is a actual punk rocker and guitarist. He's that high school boy in a band, right? So there is that. But his style when he's not, I guess you could say in costume, if you want, is that his style would be either Spike, right? Late 70s, early 80s Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Spike also got a lot of his style from another Billy Idol, especially with the bleached blonde hair. But something like this, or Johnny Napalm from the Guitar Hero series. So a lot of torn, shredded clothes, shirts showing off his arms, vest, stuff like that. Right? Him and Kid Omega would get along just great, especially with that hairdo. It's the same exact hairdo. So the story. The story is actually the part I focused on the most when it came to this character. Because again, visually there isn't much I would change. So the story is the part that I focus on the most. So here's the story. This boy is a punk. He is your classic quintessential 70s, 80s British punk, which I think I've pretty much pointed out from Jump Street, right? He plays in a punk band. He loves punk music. He is a dyed-in-the-wool British punk, like the big stomping boots, the loud music, the bad attitude that he thoroughly embraces, the whole thing. So I think a theme with him as a character, and especially with his stories, would be that he has a conflict with authority figures, and he has a conflict with his fathers, right? His biological father, who would be Sidney, nicknamed Sid Richards, and then of course there's his mother, Nancy Richards. Punk fans will understand where the names are coming from, right? But she's not going to factor too much into his story. This would be more about his conflict with male authority figures, and I'm going to go deeper into why. But again, quintessential English British punk. Right, so one of the conflicts is going to be with his father, right? His father, Sidney, right? And the reason why there's going to be a conflict with his father is because he and his father are actually a lot alike. They are very similar in temperament and personality. And Sydney is like, classic, hardworking, blue collar British man, right? Does, hard, back breaking, blue collar work. And basically, Sydney loves his son, and William loves his dad. It's just that they're so alike that they keep clashing. And then, of course, there's the generation gap thing and all that. Sydney fears for his son because of the fact that, one, he actually grew up in the punk age, right? So there's this thing of it's like, yeah, you think you're a punk, right? Because you like the aesthetic and the music. I actually was a punk. I actually grew up in that time, right? I lived it, you didn't. And what Sydney is afraid of is that his son is going to go down a very uh, uh, self-destructive path, right? Like certain famous figures in punk did, and like how Sydney himself did when he was a young man. He doesn't want his son to make the same mistakes he did, right? And when he sees his son, basically, he basically sees his younger self in his son, and it terrifies him because he's thinking, "Oh God, that's me. That's me when I was when I was 15. I don't want him to make the mistakes I made. I don't want him to end up in the place I am now, which is a sort of uh, divorced, right, broken down mentally and emotionally, blue collar working, hard working man who had a lot of potential, but he squandered it. Trying to be a rebel, as it were, right? Sydney does not look upon his punk past with any sort of pride or um, what's the word I'm looking for? He doesn't look at it as a positive time in his life. He's actually greatly come to regret it. So he's sort of like trying to cut his son off at the pass, and this conflict, right? You basically have a father trying to save his son from his fate, and the son's like, "Ah, Dad, you're just cramping my style." So there's that conflict. Then there's the conflict that cannot be avoided. His son is not human anymore. His son was born human, and I'll explain how the son now becomes this, but his son isn't human, and he's afraid that as his son grows older and these vampiric qualities become stronger and stronger within him, in particular the lust for energy, right? In this particular case, in my version, be negative while he plays on blood puns and all that with the name. He doesn't actually crave blood, but he does crave energy, right? Hence the leeches on his hands, right? So as he's getting older, this insatiable this desire for to consume energy, right? To consume life force is becoming stronger and stronger within the boy, and the father doesn't know how to handle it. So he's worried for his son's safety. He's worried for his son's health and for the health of other people, right? He doesn't want his son to go out and victimize, excuse me, victimize others, right? So there's that. Plus, there's the fact that, and here's the thing, right? The father knows that his ex-wife and his son did not become vampires willingly, and I'll explain later how that happened when I get to Morbius. But at the same time, right, he looks at his son, and because he looks so inhuman and he looks like the creature that transformed them, every time Sydney, right, William's dad, looks at his son, he sees the creature who attacked his wife and his child, right? So it's kind of like the how do I put it? The best way I can say is that he sort of sees like another man's son, right? in a sense. So there's a lot of conflict that Sidney himself feels about what his son is, because he knows that it isn't his fault, but at the same time it's like you're another man's child in a sense. He still loves his son, but again, there is a lot of emotional conflict going on there. So that's with Billy's biological father. Now you have his, I guess, vampire father, which is Michael Morbius. So this is the part of the story that I actually focused on the most last night. I spent hours trying to figure this out because Morbius factors so heavily into B Negative's story, right? He he's the reason why he is what he is. And one of the things I took great issue with in Kibblesmith's original idea is this idea of Morbius giving a child a blood transfusion. Now, I will admit I'm not too familiar with the character of Morbius, but from the reading and the research I did, he doesn't seem like the type who would give a baby a blood transfusion, especially given that he himself suffers from an insatiable bloodlust, and that when he bites people, right, and if he doesn't cure them, they will become basically lesser vampire versions of him, meaning that they will also have the insatiable bloodlust. And the whole thing about Morbius is that he's a reluctant vampire, right? He's a very tragic figure. I can't see him, at least in my opinion, I can't see him willingly giving a child a blood transfusion, right? And basically cursing them with his fate. So my thing was, okay, this has to be unwilling. How am I going to put Morbius in the picture and basically make him the sire of B Negative while still keeping it in character? So here's the story I came up with. Now I want to be clear. I'm no expert on Morbius. I could be getting it all wrong. I did do a little bit of reading, a little bit of research, so I think this should work. But this has honestly been the most difficult part for this video and so far in this little creative thinking exercise. So if you have any other ideas, or if you're more familiar with the character of Morbius and what he would and wouldn't do and what his personality is, please let me know. So I'm trying to be as in character with this as I can be, but if I'm not, if I'm missing something, if I added something, if it sounds off, please let me know. So here's how Morbius factors into everything and how basically B Negative came to be, right? How he went from being a regular boy, Billy Richards, to now being B Negative. So, excuse me. Ahem. So here's the story, right? The story starts, I would say B Negative is probably about 15 when you meet him in the New Warrior. So this story starts when he's probably 6, right? 5, 6 years old. So about 9, 10 years ago. So here's the way I see it. I think that, or at least the way I would write it, is that Morbius 9, 10 years ago was in England working on a cure for himself, working on a cure for his own vampirism. And he's been doing research into the occult and into vampire lore and all this stuff. But here's the thing. He hasn't fed because he himself needs to feed on human blood. He hasn't fed in weeks. He's been trying very hard to not feed on innocent people or on people at all, really. Excuse me. But it's been weeks. He hasn't fed on any human. He's hungry. He's tired. He's in sort of like I guess you could call it like a delirium, right? So one night he goes out and he's just hungry. He just needs to feed. He can't he can't deny it anymore, right? The lust is basically taken over and it's driven him crazy. So he ends up attacking a mother and a son who are walking home late at night. He attacks them. He starts draining them of their blood, and then once sort of like the blood haze sort of clears, he realizes what he's doing, and he stops. He's like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?" So he realizes that he's attacked these two. He feels deeply ashamed. So what he does is that he actually attacks their necks. He scratches their necks to make it look like a wild animal attacked them, because he doesn't need people knowing that a vampire is in England. I don't know exactly where in England this would happen. Certainly not London, because these type of stories are always set in London, and I don't want to do that. So it's somewhere in England. I haven't decided yet. But what happens is that he slashes their throats, but he goes through the woman's like purse and her pockets, and he finds her cell phone. So frantic, he takes her cell phones. He hides in the shadows, and he calls the British equivalent of 911, and he tells them that this mother and son duo have been attacked by a rabid animal. Please send help. They've lost a lot of blood. They're dying, right? And then he sort of like chucks the phone away somewhere. So he hides in the shadows, and he watches as the paramedics come, and they take the wounded mother and son to the hospital, and he follows them, right? He follows them because he feels guilty. So what happens is that he watches over them for like several weeks, and then once it's finally established that they'll be stabilized, what he does is that he starts working not on his cure now, but on their cure. But there's just one problem. Given that he wasn't anticipating having to feed or attack anyone, he doesn't really have the resources to create a potent cure, right? All he has is enough to create one cure, and it wouldn't even be a fully strong cure. But he figures something is better than nothing, because he knows that the longer they go without a cure, the more they will become vampires like him. So he creates this cure. There's only enough for one, and it's not as potent as a regular cure, because it's been established in his canon that he can actually create cures for the vampirism he creates, but he can't cure it in himself. Like, again, that's sort of the tragedy of this character. He can cure anyone but himself. So after he's made this weakened version of the cure, he goes to he sneaks into their hospital rooms. Right, he goes in personally to check on them. I don't know if he is religious, but in this instance, I think because of what he's done, and given that he's Greek in origin, I think so, I would have him pray for them, pray over them, and pray for forgiveness for himself, because he really did not mean or intend to attack them. So what would happen is that he would agonize over what to do. Does he give the cure to the boy? Does he give the cure to the mother? In the end, he can't decide. So what he decides to do is split the cure in between them. So it's not going to cure either one of them of their vampirism, but it will slow it down, so they won't transform as quickly, and it will lessen the effects of the transformation. So it won't be as severe or intense as it normally would be. So He gives them their half of of the cure, and then he flees away in shame. But because they are innocents, he vows that he's going to come back and cure them fully. But he has to go handle other things first. He's on the run. He feels deeply ashamed, but he vows that he's going to come back and cure them of this affliction that he brought upon them when he attacked them. Right? So that happens. All this happens when the boy is like 6 years old. Right? So their vampirism, again, is not fully cured, and but because again it's being in a sense suppressed by the cure that Morbius gave them. But as the months go by, right, the mother Nancy and Billy start to show signs of vampirism. And what happens is that as the years go on, they become more and more vampire like Morbius. So in the mother's case, she becomes very similar to Morbius over the years. And so she develops a not necessarily an insatiable lust, but a very strong desire for uh, to to consume blood, be it human blood or animal blood. Right? She starts getting this hunger for it. Right? She starts transforming, looking very similar to her son. The teeth, the ears, the pale white skin, the whole 9 yards. And as the years go on, the mother begins to feel like this attack was punishment. It was basically divine punishment because she had been a wild and crazy youth. Now, the son, Billy, he actually he doesn't like the fact of how it happened, right? But he likes the fact that he's a vampire, right? He likes being bigger and stronger than everybody else, and he likes the look and everything. What he doesn't like is the desire for life force. He wants to drain energy, whereas the mother wants to drink blood. The bloodlust, right, or the insatiable lust in him manifests in the in draining energy, right? He wants to drain life force, which is what the leeches on his hands can do, right? He just has to touch a person's face and he can drain them. Now, I want to be clear. He's not rogue. He actually does have control over that ability. So he can touch people with his bare hands just fine, right? He can activate it at his own will. The problem is that he has this, as he grows older, he has this stronger and stronger desire or a lust to consume energy, right? To drain the life force out of nearly anything. And the things that it's only life force. For example, he cannot drain electricity. So it's not like he can just put his finger in a socket and be okay. It's not going to work. He needs life force from living beings. And as he gets older, it becomes harder and harder to ignore. Right? So there's that. So what happens is as the years go on, the mother becomes more and more ashamed of what she is, of what her son has become. She divorces her husband, and she basically eventually over time withdraws from the family out of shame, right? And the Billy's being picked on in school because he looks so different, and his father has to teach him how to fight, and he's fighting in school, and he's beating kids up something fierce because he's literally bigger and stronger than they are. So it just proves too much for her. and she eventually leaves the family, and then a year, I would say, a year prior, so when Billy was 14, right, he finds out from his father that his mother, who has been out of his life for a few years, he finds out that his mother committed suicide, right? The mother sent him basically a suicide note via email, apologizing uh, to them, telling the father where to find her after the deed was done. So she takes her own life out of shame, and this is when uh, Billy's life changes again, because whereas before his only issues with being a vampire were being picked on and the increasing desire to drain energy, he now wants to hunt down the vampire who transformed him, because he blames Morbius. He blames this vampire for causing his mother's shame and ultimately his suicide. So his goal, so he starts reading everything that he can about vampires. He starts researching about vampire attacks in England and across the world, and his own attack, so that he can find out which vampire did this, so he can hunt them down and he can kill them. Because his thing now is, okay, you took my mother from me. You made her feel shame. She took her own life because of what you forcibly turned her into. I'm going to avenge her by finding who did this and killing them. Right? So that's sort of his goal. He doesn't hate all vampires. He doesn't hate himself. He just wants to find the one vampire who did this. And he eventually, through his research, finds out that the vampire who transformed him and his mother all these years ago was Michael Morbius. So, how does all this factor into the new warriors? So the way I look at it is this: it's basically all roads lead to Michael, right? So here's the way I see it, because I would the way I would write it is that the new warriors are looking for Morbius for some reason or another. Maybe he's done something and he has to stop them. Maybe they're looking for him to get advice. I don't know yet, but they're looking for him. So they're looking for him. Billy B negative is looking for him so that he can kill him, right? And then Morbius is actually looking for Billy, because Morbius never forgot what he did, and he always felt guilty about it. And now, 9 years later, he's back in England, and he's looking for the son of the woman of son. Well, basically, his son in a sense, right? He's done his research and he knows that the mother, that the woman he attacked all those years ago ended up taking her own life. So he knows that he can't do anything to help her, but he figures, okay, I can at least try to make amends, try to atone in some way by taking this full vampiric cure and using it on him. So Michael Morbius is looking for B negative so he can cure him of the vampirism, which is not something B negative wants. He just wants the energy lust, I guess you could call it, to be taken from him. But he doesn't want to not be a vampire. He thinks it's cool. He just doesn't want to be picked on, and he doesn't want the energy lust anymore. But Morbius is looking to cure B negative. B negative's looking to kill Morbius, and the new Warriors are actually looking for Morbius. So that's kind of how this would work. All roads lead to Morbius, and uh, that's how he would uh, I guess become a part of, or at least meet with, and then later become a part of the new Warriors. So please let me know what you think. I'll be back with the last video in this, which is the Incest Twins, Snowflake, and Safe Space. I know this one was a bit more lore based, a little more talky, not as based in art design, but more about background story. So please let me know what you think, especially about the Morbius part, because again, I actually feel that it's pretty weak. This was actually the most difficult part because I'm so unfamiliar with the character, but I did sincerely try to create a scenario that would be true to the character of Morbius and not violate at least any serious parts of his canon. So please let me know what you think, and I will be back with the in incest twins in the next video. See you all around. Have a good day or night. Stay safe and stay inside. Bye.